Radio Cairo English International Service presents special program COP27 Egypt 2022.
To the listeners of Radio Cairo, I am Nicole Jungo, el-Najjar, an activist from the Canary Island, and I present the speech by Dercy Teles on the importance of the United Nations Climate Change Conference, which will take place in the city of Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt from the 6th to the 8th of November 2022. Here is the speech. My thanks to the Cairo radio listeners. My name is Dercy Teles. I am a farmer, and my job is to extract rubber from the original Hevea Brazilian rubber trees. Trade unionist, popular educator, I have been active in the social movement since the age of 24, and I was with Chico Mendes during his march in defense of the life and rights of forest people. My main guideline at the moment is to contribute to the debate on this very complex subject, which today has many denominations and involves words and expressions in English that are foreign to our understanding. We are simple people and ordinary people, and this proposal that we call the green economy blur our actions to defend our territories. I view the climate issue with great concern. With each passing year, we see the increase in temperature and other phenomena that show us the reaction of nature to the aggressions caused by man. As for my expectation on the importance of implementing real solutions to avoid an environmental collapse, I believe that solutions exist as long as the world's population becomes aware of and reduces the excessive consumption of many materials that turn into waste, such as disposable products that we consume. Another example, it is scientifically proven that 80% of the world's pollution is caused by the combustion of fossil fuels, and we see no concern in the sense of substituting of reducing the use of these fuels. On the contrary, the agreements that come out of these conferences are false strategies like the sale of carbon credits. This is part of a set of false solutions that only generate more poverty and destructions of territories with a negative impact on the social, cultural, health and survival of peoples. Climate change directly affects indigenous women, traditional populations, and women leaders who defend their territories and the quality of life in the Amazon region due to their strong economic interest and the exploitation of natural resources. What we are witnessing are the threats and assassinations of the real leaders. Another problem is the cooptation of leaders when advantages are offered in exchange for negotiations and haggling at the debating table. These leaders then seek to convince other members of their communities to accept dangerous contracts. These contracts contain charming promises. However, after the signing, it is the treacherous rulers and the families who take advantage, generating internal conflicts and dividing the members of the community. Egypt as an ancient symbolism, as it is here that the record of knowledge and ancestral wisdom of the peoples of Africa was born. A region as vulnerable and culturally important as the Amazon. And many traditional peoples, such as the Quilombolas, came from Africa as slaves to the continent of Latin America and the Caribbean. These peoples today are affected and harmed in the same way as indigenous peoples on their territories, in their forests, and in their fields. I hope Egypt, being the gateway to Africa and the Middle East, that this conference will not be another conference without results, serving only business interest. I hope that we can really integrate our peoples and our nations to propose real solutions, taking into account our ancestral, cultural, and traditional knowledge, because we know how to deal with the land, the waters, and the air that we breathe. We forest people respect the land and are its guardians. First of all, I would like to congratulate the people of Egypt for hosting the COP27. This will be an opportunity to discuss the climate crisis facing the planet and to demand responsibilities and commitment. I always say that nature is very tolerant of the destructive attitudes of human beings, and that it is time to take seriously the climate change caused by our destruction. I thank the listeners, the staff of Radio Cairo, and especially Mohamed Abd Elkamel and Amyra El Khalili for the opportunity of this integration between peoples and nations. Incha Allah, Dercy Teles.
To the listeners of Radio Cairo, our greetings and thanks. My name is Franz Schmidlehner. I am a native Austrian and I graduated in philosophy at the University of Vienna. I arrived in Brazil in 1995 and started to develop projects with indigenous peoples and local communities. We founded a non-governmental organization in the state of Acre called Amazon Link. The initial goal was to make use of information and communication technologies to benefit these peoples and communities and strengthen their struggle for their rights. We discovered and denounced a series of trademark and patent registrations involving biological resources from the Amazon. As a result, from 2003 on, the combat and prevention of biopiracy became the main focus of our work. In 2010, I completed my master's thesis at the University of Vienna, an analysis of the discourses and power structures that guide international development and biodiversity policies. In this same year, in Acre, a law was created which prepares for the implementation of a regulated subnational market, that is, a market between states, for forest carbon credits and other eco-credits. This law was created without adequate consultation with affected communities and is considered by many to be unconstitutional. Yet it still serves as a model for other states and regions with tropical forests where policies of financialization of nature are being imposed. An activist group has since formed in protest against these maneuvers of green capitalism and has been denouncing the false solutions to the climate disaster. In this line, I act together with the Indigenist Missionary Council and the World Rainforest Movement, participating in events and contributing with publications and analysis. Since 2017, I am a professor of philosophy at the Federal Institute of Acre. Currently, I am working on my doctoral thesis at the Federal University of ABC, analyzing the profound changes in the society-nature relationship that accompany the implementation of green capitalism. The latest report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has made it clear once again that the policies currently adopted by governments to deal with climate change are completely inadequate to achieve the target set in the Paris Agreement, the target of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees. The report states that in order to preserve the chance of a habitable future on our planet, carbon emissions must halve by 2030. But in reality, the trend is going in the opposite direction. In fact, since the adoption of this agreement in 2015, banks have provided $2.7 trillion in financing to fossil fuel companies, with the annual amount increasing every year since 2016. We have to ask ourselves why, after 30 years, more than a generation, of international climate and biodiversity conferences, why are the causes of the problem, known by us since many decades, not being addressed? The policies being formulated within the UN framework under strong pressure from polluting industries and large conservationist NGOs are to a large extent based on climate compensation. The 1997 Kyoto Protocol still intended to be a binding agreement with real greenhouse gas reductions. But its binding nature was soon weakened by the so-called Clean Development Mechanism, which allowed emissions to be offset through the purchase of carbon credits. Now, the Paris Agreement is no longer intended to be binding, but is based only on nationally determined contributions, and the failure to meet targets is not penalized. Also of great concern in this agreement is that it extends in its 5th article the logic of carbon offsetting to existing forests, especially tropical forests. With this, it ends up recognizing and sanctioning on national level the mechanism called reduction of emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, known by the acronym REDD, R-E-D-D. This provides free course for the implementation of this market mechanism, which is already having devastating impacts on tropical forests at subnational level and within the voluntary market framework, violation of rights, criminalization and expulsion of indigenous and traditional communities, among others. The problem with these false solutions goes well beyond their violent impacts and their ineffectiveness in relation to the climate crisis. There is a false discourse that promotes compensation schemes through the misleading advertising of slogans like nature-based solutions. This discourse prevents society from perceiving the real situation, that is, that in fact we have not even begun to react in a meaningful way to the imminent catastrophe. Real solutions, such as drastically reducing emissions at the source instead of offsetting them, imposing divestment from fossil fuels, and as soon as possible ceasing completely their extraction, are not even discussed in the climate summit. Africa is said to be the cradle of mankind, because the human species originated in this continent. Today, our species is on the verge of destroying its own living conditions and those of countless other living beings. We are facing a decisive situation without precedent. It is no exaggeration to call this an ongoing war against the earth, promoted by the profit interests of large corporations and banks, and this war is directly linked to the colonialist and imperialist exploitation that has descended on the African peoples over the last century. COP27 is an opportunity for the civil society of Africa and the world to oppose these interests and processes, and to demand an end to this suicidal war against life. There is a strong anti-colonial movement in Africa and strong initiatives against carbon colonialism that is implemented through the carbon market. The engagement of these activists inside and outside the COP27 will be of extreme importance. Sharm el-Sheikh is known worldwide as the City of Peace. In order for it to live up to this reputation, it is necessary that the voice of Egyptian and global civil society can be heard strongly from here during this conference. The conferences on climate and biodiversity were from the beginning successively instrumentalized by the interests of the big polluters and speculative capital through aggressive propaganda. The way it is today, we can no longer expect that real, true solutions will be implemented from there. We can no longer leave the issue in the hands of government negotiators. We, the civil society, must take action. Our call in this moment has to be, let us reject the false solutions. Let us stand in solidarity with the struggle of the forest peoples. Let us unite in defense of life. Thank you to the listeners, the Radio Cairo team, and especially Mohamed Abd Elkamel and Amyra El Khalili for the opportunity of this integration between peoples and nations. Incha Allah.